Okay, we're going to continue today talking about the process of photosynthesis and go more into depth. Make sure that you have your notebook with you, your spiral, and a pen, and that you are taking notes on this. Make sure that you pause as you go through, not only to answer the questions, but also to make sure you get all the notes written down. All right, so why do chloroplasts contain so many membranes? So if you look at the picture of the chloroplast here, you have all the thylakoids stacked up. So why are there so many? When most pigments absorb light, they eventually lose most of that energy as heat. The chloroplast avoids such losses. Membranes are the key to capturing light energy in the form of high energy electrons. So what happens during the light-dependent reactions? The light-dependent reactions use energy from the sunlight to produce oxygen and also to convert ADP and NADP into energy carriers, and those are ATP and NADPH. The light-dependent reactions encompass or take up the steps of photosynthesis that directly involve sunlight. So remember, light dependent and light independent don't necessarily mean they're happening during the day and during the night. It just means that one needs sunlight to happen. So the light-dependent reactions occur in the thylakoid of the chloroplast. So inside those little pancake-looking things is where light-dependent reactions occur. Thylakoid cluster Thylakoids contain clusters of chlorophyll and proteins known as photosystems. The photosystems absorb sunlight and generate high-energy electrons that are then passed to a series of electron carriers embedded in the thylakoid membrane. So we're going to go through this step by step, but just remember that when the sunlight comes in, and we have water being broken down, it's going to follow these arrows that you see here, and it actually goes to photosystem 2 before it goes to photosystem 1. It's something very important to be aware of. So, photosystem 2. The light energy is absorbed by electrons and the pigments within photosystem 2. This increases the electron's energy level. The high energy electrons are passed to the electron transport chain, and this is a series of electron carriers that shuttle high energy electrons during ATP reactions. So here you can see up close those arrows where it it begins with the electrons given off in the hydrolysis and then moves on through to the electron carriers and then to photosystem 1. You can also see where the light is coming in and giving extra energy in photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. The thylakoid membrane provides new electrons to chlorophyll from water molecules. What do we call the breaking apart of water molecules? Enzymes of the inner surface of the thylakoid break up water molecules into 2 electrons, 2 hydrogen ions, and 1 oxygen atom. But as you see here, we're breaking 2 water molecules, okay, which is going to give 4 hydrogens and 2 oxygens. And remember, oxygen can't just be by itself. It always has to be paired, so it always has to be O2 whenever it's occurring in nature. So 2 electrons replace the high energy electrons that have been lost to the electron transport chain, and oxygen is released into the air. This reaction is the source of nearly all the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. So the fact that you have air to breathe, this is the step that's responsible for you having air to breathe. The hydrogen ions are released inside the thylakoid. So you see all the hydrogens that are floating around here. Okay, hydrogen ions are also pumped inside the thylakoid space, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So energy from the electrons is used by proteins in the electron transport chain to pump hydrogen ions across the stroma into the thylakoid space. So you see this pink electron carrier here? Okay. Remember that electron carriers, any of these kind of pumps are made out of what? What macromolecule are these made out of? Okay. At the end of the electron transport chain, the electrons pass to photosystem 1. So they start off in photosystem 2, they're carried through electron carriers to the photosystem 1. Because some energy has been used to pump hydrogen ions across the thylakoid membrane, electrons do not contain as much energy as they did at the beginning. So what happens is here in photosystem 1, you again have light energy, just like you did in photosystem 2, that's going to going to give the electrons back the energy that they lost in pumping the hydrogen inside the thylakoid space. Okay, so at the end of a short second electron transport chain, you now have NADP molecules in the stroma that pick up the high energy electrons and the hydrogen ions at the outer surface of the thylakoid membrane, and now it can become NADPH. And NADPH is the charged battery. It has the energy. Okay, so if we're following the yellow arrows through, you have 4 electrons that are given off through hydrolysis. These are carried through the electron transport chain using electron carriers from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1. And then at photosystem 1, they are taken outside of the thylakoid space into the stroma. And here they can be used along with hydrogen to add to the NADP to make NADPH. Okay. Hydrogen ion movement and ATP formation. So, hydrogen ions accumulate within the thylakoid space from the splitting of water and from being pumped in from the stroma. So, 2 different ways that we're getting these hydrogens inside the thylakoid space. 1, through hydrolysis, and 2, through the electron carriers that are pumping the hydrogen in. The buildup of hydrogen ions makes the stroma negatively charged relative to the space within the thylakoids. So the thylakoid space is negatively charged because of the hydrogen. Okay, this gradient, the difference in both charge and hydrogen ion concentration, hydrogen ion concentration across the membrane provides the energy to make ATP. So let me say that again. The gradient difference in both charge and hydrogen ion concentration across the membrane provides the energy to make ATP. So you can see right inside the thylakoid space all of those hydrogen ions that are building up right there by the ATP synthase. Those help change the ADP to ATP. The hydrogens are pumped out, and that energy changes ADP to ATP. Again, ADP is our half-charged battery. ATP is a fully charged battery. Hydrogen ions cannot directly cross the thylakoid membrane. However, the thylakoid membrane contains another protein, called ATP synthase, that spans the membrane and allows hydrogen ions to pass through it. ATP synthase, remember we talked about the fact that the ACE, ASE, means that it's an enzyme. Powered by the gradient, hydrogen ions pass through ATP synthase and force it to rotate. As it rotates, ATP synthase binds ADP and a phosphate group together, and then you get ATP. So the ATP synthase holds onto the ADP and a phosphate group, and the action of the hydrogen going out gives the energy for the ADP to be put together with the phosphate to give us ATP. This process is called chemiosmosis. It's called chemiosmosis, and it enables light-dependent electron transport to produce not only the NADP that we saw, but also ATP. So chemiosmosis is what we call this whole process. Okay, so at the end of this, we not only have an NADPH, which is formed by the electrons that were given off through the hydrolysis, but we also are able to make an ATP from all the hydrogens that come out. So, a summary of the light-dependent reactions. It produces an oxygen gas and converts ADP and NADP to the electron carriers ATP and NADPH. ATP and NADPH then provide the energy needed to build high energy sugars from low energy carbon dioxide. All right, so we're going to stop right there with this section, and we'll continue in class tomorrow.